So if you're a rock and roll fan or a rhythm and blues fan, you probably remember, praise Stevie Ray Vaughan. So let's just, this is a point of personal privilege. Alan Paul writes for Guitar World and has put out a new book on Stevie Ray. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
First of all, obviously you're Les Paul's illegitimate son, and that's why you're.
How do you know it's illegitimate?
That's a good point. How long you been working on Guitar World?
I started working at Guitar World in 1991, and as long ago as that was, and several lifetimes and several musical trends coming and going, it was still after Stevie Ray Vaughan passed away. So that puts a little perspective on how long Stevie's been gone.
I remember when he died. It was a helicopter crash, if I remember.
Yes, it was.
And I was doing a lot of rock and roll lighting. I used to have a real job, and I remember what hit me about that was, one, I really liked Stevie Ray Vaughan's music. It was just incredible. And two, I bet there was a guy from his crew on board, and nobody's going to remember the lighting guy that goes down.
Right.
You're lucky. Can you name the pilot for the Big Bopper and
Right.
Richie Valens plane? No.
Unfortunately, so what happened in this instance is they had played with Eric Clapton at Alpine Valley in Wisconsin. It's a troublesome place to get in and out of. It's a beautiful venue, but there's literally one road in and out. And it's not too far from Chicago, especially as the crow flies, so a lot of bands like to helicopter in and out. It's a very quick ride down to Chicago. So they cut a deal basically where Clapton's helicopters would take Clapton and his crew back to Chicago, then come back and take Stevie and his band and crew. And at the last minute, one of Clapton's guys decided not to get on the helicopter. I guess he decided to go off with a friend or whatever. They ran in and said, hey, there's an empty spot on there. Stevie wanted to get back to the hotel to call his girlfriend. He said to everyone, do you mind if I take the seat? So the other members of the other people in the helicopter were all members of Eric Clapton's entourage.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, so it was Eric Clapton's booking agent, his bodyguard, and his, I believe, assistant tour manager.
Oh my Lord, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
incredible.
Yes, and so, the tragedy speaks for itself. I mean, he was 35. It wasn't, the tragedy of Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison is immense and speaks for itself. Duane Allman, I would put there too. All of those people, to some extent or another, were victim of their lifestyle. And it doesn't make the sadness any less. But, Stevie belongs in the category with Buddy Holly and Otis Redding, people who were taken away by these aviation accidents. And
Jim Croce.
Jim Croce, yes, absolutely. And Stevie was really at the height of his career. He is just turning a corner in his personal life. He was 3.5 years sober after a debilitating drug and alcohol addiction that really almost left him dead. He didn't choose to get sober. He had to get sober, but he embraced it. And he was playing this incredible music. His last 2 records were In Step, his last album with Double Trouble, and then the last thing he had recorded but not released yet was Family Style with his brother Jimmy, who was his closest, most important musical idol. So
who was also with the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
He was, but he had left the Fabulous Thunderbirds at that point. He had just left in order to record this album with Jimmy and with Stevie. I'm sorry, and Stevie and Jimmy together had the Vaughan Brothers band, and no one really knows. He was going to continue to do both. But those albums are wonderful. His concerts were incredible.
For people who are PBS junkies, the Austin City Limits special with Stevie Ray Vaughan is a classic, and you can repeat it over and over and see it over and over again. It was one of the, it was before the time of great concert videos or too much, flashy 80s silliness. So it's great to actually just see a show recorded that way on Austin City Limits. How much did Austin City Limits play a role in his success?
So he came up through Austin. He's a Dallas native, but as a band, they came through Austin. Very much wanted to be on Austin City Limits, sort of couldn't get on there. But as soon as the first record came out, they were invited on, and that first performance was incredible. And it did expose him to a lot of people outside of Texas for the first time. I interviewed Terry Lacona for the book, the producer of Austin City Limits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he said, that first thing, that was obviously before DVRs. This was in 1983. Right. I think it was aired in 84, filmed in 83. And it was, they were inundated with phone calls from people begging to release it on VHS at that point. it lit the world on fire. Then he appeared again, not too long before his death, a second time, after he had cleaned up. And Terry Lacona, who's produced Austin City Limits for, I think, 45 years, calls that his favorite performance, because I think that's the one you're really talking about, although they're both great. But that last one is when he was just bursting out. I mean, he wasn't contained by a genre. He wasn't just a blues guitarist. He wasn't just anything.
But it really starts, it is kind of a Western Texas version of rhythm and blues with rock and roll guitars. Is that a good description?
Sure, it's a good description as far as it goes, but the reason that you can never fully describe it is because Stevie Ray Vaughan was so singular. So you can just, that all totally makes sense, and yet it's too narrow, it's not broad enough. So I would think that the best artists, and B.B. King himself in an interview with me for the book, compared Stevie to Charlie Christian, Charlie Parker, some of the all-time great improvisers. Right. And so Charlie Parker is a jazz saxophone player, but he's not contained by jazz. He's just, right. And that's one of the things that my co-author, Andy Aladort, and I wanted to do with this book. And we felt that his story hadn't really been told all these years since he's been gone in a proper way, and he hadn't been put in proper context, which is the advantage we have of all these years, to put Stevie Ray Vaughan in the context of the great instrumentalists. And I'm talking about Charlie Parker, Charlie Christian, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Albert King, Wes Montgomery.
Even though those are so different, I mean,
it doesn't matter.
They're like record bins. They're all in different.
It doesn't matter.
This one's jazz. This one's blues. This one's country. This one's.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
But
it's embracing the world. It's bigger than any of the genres. Stevie, if you had to boil it down, you'd say he was a blues guitarist.
All right, so you've been doing this a long time, and you look at all sorts of guitarists. It's your job. You're a big fan of the Allman Brothers.
Right.
But why Stevie?
Well, so my last book was One Way Out. It's a book about the Allman Brothers. Fortunate enough that it did well, and the publisher said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, if I'm going to do something at all similar, it has to be someone whose music I love as much, because it's a deep dive with a story that hasn't been told properly, and that has a story to tell. Because I'm a writer, it has to be a story. And Stevie's story is incredibly compelling as a musician, but also as a person. Because when I said that he had cleaned himself up and entered a new phase with his music, that was with his life too. His story is bigger than music.
Tell me a little bit about the story. We've got a couple minutes, so don't give it all away, but tell me what made his life different.
As I said, he almost died because of his drug and alcohol addiction. He hit the wall where he collapsed. He didn't choose to be sober, he had to be sober. He embraced it in such a way that he became really a bigger, broader, better person. That was reflected in his music, but it's not just his music. He never got free.
Stop there for a second, because so often, I hate to say this, so often when a guy cleans up in music, his music stinks. There is something about, when you're going through the worst of it, there's something about it pops out over here. And
here's the thing.
You want a case in point? Billy Joel gets all happy, marries Christy Brinkley, and comes out with a cappella. Right. All right, that's why happiness is not good for music.
No, Stevie embraced his sobriety, and he was scared of that. He was scared to play sober. But this is why this is a story that transcends music. A lot of people who have addictions have the same fear. It might not be about music. It might be about they're scared to go on TV. They're scared to go on the radio. They're scared to do their job, deal with their spouse, deal with their kid, deal with life. They're scared of that. And the only way to find out if they can do it is to do it. Stevie was scared of that. He embraced it wholeheartedly. Bonnie Raitt, we talked to for the book.
Oh, wow.
One of my favorite people. Bad drinking problem, inspired to get clean by Stevie. Because the first time she saw him, she said, he was better than he ever was. He was more fiery. He was more pure. He was better. Clean. And Bonnie said, there went my last excuse, because that's what she always said. I can't get clean or I won't be able to play anymore. Bonnie's another person whose career took off after she got clean. Nick of Time and her whole career renaissance was a reflection of her new life and her sobriety. So I think that we as a society often focus on the first category that you're talking about, and sometimes it's because the second category people don't want to talk about it as much. But
it's not nearly as fun to talk about.
Right. It's not, unless you're Stevie Ray Vaughan. And so Ray Wiley Hubbard, the great Texas blues sort of folk singer, he wrote Up Against the Wall, Your Redneck Mother. He attributed his whole life to Stevie, because he was drunk. And he said, I never was interested in getting clean, because everyone I knew who got clean was like they were on the 700 Club. And Stevie was the first guy I ever met who was clean and cooler than ever, and it intrigued me. And when he met with Stevie, he said, man, what's it like to be sober? Because I can't imagine not having a beer for an hour. And Stevie said, it's like I had boxing gloves on and now I'm touching my guitar for the first time.
Wow.
And that's how he really felt, that without the substances, he had a purity of his soul connection to his guitar. And that, you go back, what makes Stevie special? Ultimately, it's that. I think that if you're a guitar player or a musician, you can break down some very specific things, but as a general listener, you don't need any of that. Anybody can feel that deep connection, the commitment. He never took a single second off, not one note. Every note has a personality, every note has a purpose. And there's no line between Stevie Ray Vaughan the person, Stevie Ray Vaughan the musician. That's why when he cleaned up and got to that new place in life, his music got even bigger and better.
All right, again, the book, Texas Flood, and you're a guitarist. Now listen, I'm a master of the ukulele. All right, give me four strings. I know my art. But being a guitarist yourself, how good was he as a guitarist? Because you don't understand that. I never understood how great John Entwistle was as a bass player until I hung out with a couple bass players and their jaws just drop every time they watched him play. I was like, I don't get it. It's like, you don't get it because you don't get it.
Right.
What don't we get?
Stevie Ray Vaughan was completely fluid, completely functional in everything he did. He never paused to think. He never, rarely repeated himself. You're
talking about on the guitar.
On the guitar. And he was such a great guitarist that I think his songwriting and his singing are a bit underrated because I think they're really wonderful, and that's what allowed him to get across to so many people. But his guitar playing is so next level that that's what people focus on. So my co-author, Andy Alador, is a great guitarist. He's toured with Dickie Betts. He's played with Double Trouble. He played with Band of Gypsies, Jimi Hendrix's guys. So he could explain the technicalities of it better than most people, but I don't think you need that in order to understand just the pure soul and the fire and the way he never had to stop and he never seemed to have a line.
We only got a few seconds, but there's something else that, I think about the jazz guys and it's over my head. All right, yeah, people are into jazz, go, that's incredible, and it's like it's just noise. And so for even a simple mind, I think what Stevie Ray Vaughan did is he bridged that. He can impress a guy like you, but he can impress a guy like me. All right, the book, Texas Flood. Where do you get it?
Anywhere.
Anywhere and everywhere.
If you're in Denver, Tattered Cover has it, and they have signed copies, Boulder Bookstores.
Thank you so much. Could talk all day about this one. Read me in the Denver Post. Check me out on KHOW Radio. Go to the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.